Richard. Thank you everyone for turning up tonight. My name's Robin Campbell. Like Richard said, I'm Investor Relations for the Coin Group based in Bristol. So we do trades, we do flips, but tonight I'm going to actually show you some of the things that make up the DNA of the business. So the business from the drains up. I'm going to show you inside the business how we do our sourcing. I'm going to show you planning gain strategy. And every time I go through a strategy, I'm going to invite Mike up to take some questions. But I'm going to precede that with some lessons learned from each of those types of strategies. So I would like you to take away some of those key learnings, and you're very welcome to ask questions at those moments. We've got 2 or 3 other strategies we use regularly, so refurbishments at the top end of the market. And we also have something which we like to call opulent living. So I'll explain a bit more about that when the time comes. Finally, our final strategy is purpose-built student accommodation. We'll then go through the deal structure, how we do funding, and then we'll open up the mic to Mike. And it'll be a free-for-all, but I've also got some kind of canned questions for Mike, which I'm sure you'll find interesting. So without further ado, let's start with who we are and where we come from. So we're based in Clapton and Gordano. So anyone know the M5 South, Portishead Junction? So about 1.5 miles from there, not many. So you come off the M4, turn left onto the M5. It's about 10 miles from the Cribs Causeway Junction, if you know that. So planning gain deals, top end refurbishments, sometimes building out, mainly just flipping to developers, and then purpose-built student accommodation. So Mike's been in property for 20 years. He started in retail. His kind of background was turning failing stores in the Envy men's clothing chain. I don't know if you remember that. You have to be about at least 35, 40 to remember that. That was Mike's skill set, was turning around something in distress and creating value and driving the stores on to profit. That's Mike's house. It's kind of a very exclusive private road in Bristol called Cadbury Camp Lane. There's a few celebrities live on that road. So it's an inspirational place for me to come and work, but obviously this is where we like to base ourselves. I'll go into the team and what we do in the company a bit later on. And then here's our kind of strategy. So we do JV partnerships with a 50% profit share. Everything must be 35% ROA or more, at least, for the investor on their equity.
Do you want to explain what that is? Just so everybody doesn't know that, 35% ROI.
So return on investment, if the capital going in doesn't bring back 35% or more on their money when we sell, when we flip, then it won't meet our criteria. So it has to exceed 35%. We do refurbishments at the top end of the market, usually 4 to 8 months. Typical returns 35 to 50%. We do new builds, and I'll show you some of these, which annually would return 40 to 60%. Planning gain 45, up to some really, really nice deals, up to 100, but I sort of stay down the bottom end of that range as a typical value. And then we do student builds, which is a 3-year program, basically. 12 months taking a site unconditionally, 12 months building it out, and then a 12-month yield to generate at the end of 1 year's student cycle. At that point, you can flip to a fund or an institution. So here's the team. So I've simplified this. Forgive the avatars, but it makes life easy if I do it this way. Mike's the deal maker of the team. He obviously founded the Coin Group some time ago. He trained for 13 years. I joined last year. Now, my background is actually an IT consultant, but I joined Simon Zucci's program last October 13, finished last autumn. Prior to that, I was also director in a buy-to-let business that has 280 properties under management, new build and student HMOs. I still have a very part-time involvement in that business, but that's how I actually got to know Mike. We shared an office, and some of Mike's stock came to our clients. He was giving us the sort of off-plan bits and bobs at the beginning and the end, and we would sell those to investors. So I've done a lot of presentations, probably about, too many to count, probably about 100 with that business, and that's how I got to know Mike. Mike gave me a call last year when I was on the BBC Points West programme, a pensions versus property debate. I did okay. I was wheeled out against the Hargreaves Lansdowne bigwig Tom McPhail. You saw it, didn't you, Steve?
Yeah, I saw it, yeah.
I really enjoyed it, although I was absolutely terrified. But Mike saw it, gave me a ring, brought me back to the office and showed me a couple of his deals. You can imagine what it's like in the pin circuit. I'm quite a big networker. And he said, "Have you got anyone for these deals?" And I went, yes. A bit of a no-brainer. So I actually tested the market with Mike, found a very strong demand for what he does, and I'm absolutely thrilled to say that in April I'll be coming out of my IT contracting position. I have 4 children and a mortgage, but Mike and I get on so well. Excuse me, I'm now part of the business. So Svetlana, she's Russian, trained, St. Petersburg, asset management company, financial analyst. If you've ever done wealth dynamics before, anyone done that before? She's definitely the lord of the business, and that means she's the detailed, analytical, statistical person, very accurate with the numbers. She will shape all our appraisals. She'll go to the banks and the funders for lending. She'll insert those parameters into the spreadsheets that we use, and we get a stage 1, 2, and 3 appraisal done to precision at the right time. So that's what Svetlana's role is. Kim, site manager. His biggest project is 400 houses. He's built a lot of things with Mike going back 25 plus years. He now runs our construction side of the business. Stuart, the office manager. Stuart is basically the glue that keeps the processes ticking along nicely. And if you do wealth dynamics, he's a supporter. He's a good team player. He brings the detail and the due diligence into our processes and keep things ticking along. Fiona, the bookkeeper, she's obviously taking care of our finance. And then for this year, we've got aggressive plans to open up a London office with Roland, and with Paul, we're going to replicate what Mike does. So sourcing deals in the Southwest and the Midlands, while Mike can concentrate on London. So that's our 2015 strategy. The Coin Group is made up of 2 components at the moment. So we have Coin Wealth. That's basically the limited company you trade with as an investor. Coin Construction is obviously the building side of what we do. Coin Group has now been left to one side as a legacy business because Mike's had his eye leaving this to his son. So Coin Group will actually be passed on to Mike's son while these 2 businesses persist. So let's start with the power team. You all know that we've got to have a strong power team manager. The reason why I put this picture up is about January the 10th, Mike had invited his entire power team, so his agents, planning consultants, architects, lawyers, accountants and so on, to a really nice meal, exclusive meal in a place called The Pig in Pensford. It's organic food, wonderful restaurant. I was really thrilled to be around that table. And what struck me was the gentleman from the planning consultants team stood up and raised a toast to Mike and said, if you've made it around this table, you can count yourself as quite privileged, because it means you've done Mike a good turn, and he really rates you as an individual, as your professionalism. So there were 25 people around that table, and what struck me as a sort of newcomer into the business was Mike has really nurtured these relationships, and this is the essence of how Mike gets what he needs done. So sourcing from really top end, really good land agents, and guys who just work for him, on demand basically. I've been in the car with Mike from Bristol to London today, and I've heard the architect first of all saying no to an appointment, a half-a-day appointment on Thursday. About an hour later, I think I can do it, Mike. So, he breeds the goodwill of all those around him because he's good to them and treats them well. So how does Mike source? Well, I guess you guys know what you're doing anyway, but I'm going to, if you don't mind, I'm just going to cover all the avenues that Mike deals with to source his deals. So auctions, agents, hearsay and the rumours, receivers, we've got contacts in network rail, banks, repossessions, obviously the property network, insolvency practitioners, debt collectors, right move with the old commercial sites first, and we have contacts in the NHS, and a couple more sourcing agents, and finally Google Earth, because you can spot the odd lost plot, can't you, with Google Earth. When you're hovering over a site, you can see a green area that might be jumping out at you as a forgotten plot in an estate. So that's how we tend to get our our deals. I mentioned to someone who is just coming in today, this is how we can get some of our other deals. So business networking, and I want to cover off a couple of those now for me. I belong to a not-for-profit group in Cheltenham, and there's the BBC guys who, through my network, did this TV show. That's BBC Radio Gloucester. But 3 gentlemen in this group have given me 3 cracking deals. 2 of them have come into Coin Group. So the first one is the Lost Plot, which is in Stroud. The gentleman who owns this is the architect for the whole estate, and he's left this plot to his wife, who he became estranged to 30 years ago. Finally, the kids are putting pressure on him to sell. His wife can't live there anymore, it's overgrown, and they're putting pressure on Dad to sell. So we're doing an option on this plot, and there's a space for 12 3-bed houses. So this came through a debt collector in my networking group. So if you're not already a member of a business networking group, I thoroughly recommend it. Here's another one. A letting agent in my group does garden clearances for the council. Now he has a contract which will take him into a site where the gardens become overgrown, the trees have gone over the sides of the walls, and now the neighbours are complaining. So what he's done is he's taken this opportunity to strike a rapport with the owner, who's now kind of jarred off that he's been chased by the council to pay a £2,000 bill for the clearance that he didn't want anyway. He's unencumbered property because he's probably moved out. A lot of these are unmortgageable as well, they've become really run down. So my letting agent's striking a rapport up with those vendors. They're not vendors yet, but they will be. And he's positioning us with Mike such that we can negotiate a cash purchase, do a refurb and sell on the open market, and rent off the open market. Now our strategy here would be to buy the investor out, put it on a buy-to-let mortgage, the investor takes a return, and we've done a nice return for the owner, who probably never managed to sell anyway. So there's an idea that came through our networking. And finally, there was another one. So we've got debt collector. We had a guy who was an administrator for the LPA receiver, and his job was to write a recce for all those receivers. So on his books, he had about 5 receivers and 6 banks. He said to me, Robin, I said, I don't know if you're interested in this, but I get a lot of rundown properties. And I went, I think we need to talk. So I went for a cup of tea, we sat down in it was his back room, his office, and he had 6 to 7 a week like this. And I just couldn't believe my luck. But I sat down to him and I said, okay, let's start to qualify some of these. And all I'm trying to say is, look to your local network, your BN, not necessarily BNIs, but those type of networking groups. Because this gentleman didn't pitch his business to the room as a receiver administrator. He was a utility warehouse distributor. And that was his part-time business. His full-time business was this admin. And nobody had ever approached him in 20 years, not one property investor. So it struck me as the gold within my midst that I didn't really know until I'd been on a Simon Zucci course. Suddenly I realised the value in my phone book. So now let's move on to our first strategy, so planning game.
Robin, can I just interrupt?
Yeah.
Do you mind taking questions? I should have asked at the beginning, sorry folks. Do you mind taking questions from the room while you're giving the presentation?
Not at all. And
right.
What I suggest is after this strategy 1, I'll show you the key learning slide, and then perhaps Mike can stand up and you can fire some questions at us. Is that
so
right?
So questions are cool.
Is that okay?
Put a hand up if you want to ask a question, that's cool.
So, no problem. So this is a site in Kings Winford, Stourbridge, and it's a pub that was bought in distress off a receiver. 6 to 9 month play here. We looked to put a scheme for 14 houses on it. We like it because it's got a big car park, a beer garden. We like it because the local plan has said we have high demand for housing. We like it also because there's a combination of exits going on here. There's a combination of strategies we can deploy here and mitigate the risk. So it's very important when you go into planning game deals that you have several exits in mind to mitigate the risk. So first one is make sure it's not the only pub in the village. So let's go through the exits. First one would be put 14 houses on it. If we don't get a residential scheme, There is one aspect to pubs also that we like, and that's the fact they have a retail and a residential element already as a precedent. So you've got the accommodation for the staff and the pub itself serving food and drink. So you've got a mixed use in play already. So to make sure you're kind of hedging as you put your planning in, you should always have your various exits. So secondary exits might be a mixed use scheme, retail and resi. The next one you might want to just have a commercial scheme, so a doctor's surgery, a veterinary surgery, a doctor's nursery, vets. You could also refurb this pub in its existing footprint, so just accommodation without having any planning. And then finally, you could refurb it, sell to another pub chain, and then the last resort would be flip it into auction. So it's really important you've got clarity before you go into the deal. The next thing you'll probably do is do a subject to survey. So this particular deal, Mike took a steer from the planning consultants who said, I would advise you to have a mining survey and a bat survey. So there must have been some kind of conservation order concern with the bats, and obviously in a mining town or near a mining town.
All the bats.
So bats, as in the mammals that fly, this sort of size,
flying mice
that might be roosting in the roof. And so, you know, if there's someone with a green concern or a nature concern, they can actually list or try and list the building on a conservation issue. And block the planning. Yeah.
So I think the most important thing is any building that looks like this with a high roof and lofts, you will find bats in it, and that's the biggest problem. And unfortunately with planning, as planning's got easier, things have got tighter, as in the green part, all these different parties, you know, there's conservation on bats and, you know, plants and, you know, crested newts and you name it, everything's protected. So you've got to be very careful, because, you know, a lot of people buy these buildings and then realise there's bats in it, and they think, well, I can just demolish the building. Well, you can't demolish the building, and they can actually take it to court.
Do we have bats in London?
Yeah, bats everywhere. It's amazing, and you have different species of bats. So it's something that, you know, you can become an expert on very quickly, because once you buy a building and you realise there's bats in it, you become an expert because you have to, because these people, and believe me, you know, the locals know this, there's always someone. So, you know, we bought buildings before, and one of the strategies is we always clear the building out. As soon as we buy it, we clear it out. And the reason is we bought a building in Burton-on-Trent, right? And there was a guy that was very interested in that building, and he did everything to get into that building, and he got the ceiling inside listed, right? And we couldn't do anything with the building. And that's why whenever you buy a building, you've got to strip it out, and you've got to make sure there's nothing in it before you buy it. Then you're okay. Then you've got a canvas to work off to go for your planning. So that's really important.
Okay. So, multiple exits. So here we go. I've already mentioned them. You have a mixed-use scheme, a retail perhaps, a doctor's or dentist surgery. Look how big that one is. You could refurbish to flats within the existing footprint, so you're not getting planning and you're doing something with the existing footprint. Or you could sell at auction. So it's kind of reminders of that.
Yes. Sorry, can I quickly ask? You're mentioning like vets or doctors. I can cope with the idea that you might, you know, develop an area and say, okay, I'm going to put news agents in or whatever. But vets or doctors is quite a specific thing. Do you usually find groups who will actually, where you can go to them and say, look, you know, we'd like a doctor's surgery in here. Are you interested?
Yes, within this room, we're one click away. We might have someone in this room who actually represent a care buyer, who will pay good money for a care scheme. Mm-hmm. It's an adapted scheme, so it might be assisted living or, you know, your surgery, totally different. But do you want to comment?
I think the most important thing there is, why were pubs built? Pubs were built in the community, right? People talk about fashion and trends, right? And they say pubs are fashionable, right? The trend hasn't gone away, it's just turned into a coffee shop. So now people go for a cup of coffee rather than going to a pub. You know, as a country, we've changed. You know, years ago, we were all very manual workers. We worked in factories. Now we've become white-collar workers more and more. And so fashion's changed. So all these pubs are in areas of, you know, high population, good transport, So that's why a veterinary service will work in that area. And a lot of people use them for offices or different things because they can park, it's close to the community, they can get to it. So people look at a pub and just go, oh, there's an old pub, it's of no actual use. But it is of actual use, it's of use to the community. And if you can demonstrate something with that pub that will become a use to the community, they don't feel like you're closing down their pub and not doing anything with it.
Does that make planning easier as well? Because I know a lot of planners object to pubs.
That's a very good question. That depends where it is in the country. If you're talking about Bristol, then it's very, very difficult. But if you're talking about Birmingham, where there's a lot of pubs, it becomes a lot easier because there's a lot of pubs. But again, you know, you see it in Surrey and areas like that where there's one of the last pubs, and that pub is hinged in the community. So many years ago, we were buying a pub in Bromford, which is in Birmingham, quite a very run-down area, part of Birmingham. And we pulled up on the car park, and it wasn't good what we looked at. And we thought this is going to be a very straightforward opportunity here. There was a bowling green, and there was a team that were members from quite a long way away of that bowling green, and they protected that pub. They held on to that pub. And even though that pub needed to be redeveloped, so we had to do it with different strategies. So they are really unhinged in the community. So if I'm frightening you about pubs, that's what I'm trying to do. What I'm saying to you is you really need to do your homework. Just don't go out and buy a pub and think it's taken as a given, because it's not. You've got to look at it and think, is that the only pub in the community? What's the local community like? Do they use it? Is it being used? Go there. Go in there and sit in there. You know, try it out a couple of times. You'll soon see what type of people actually use the pub, and then you get an opportunity. Then you see.
So what if the pub's already shut and has been for a long time?
Why is it closed? There's a reason why it's closed, and that's what you need to get to. Because a lot of these pubs, Punch, or all the big breweries sell them on. Because what they, you know, like you've got Enterprise that's got 950 pubs at the moment across the UK. They'll look at their stock and they'll refinance, they'll get rid of 30 pubs. So that gets sold to Punch, and then Punch sell it to Pop or whoever, whichever. So you need to find out why it's being sold. Sometimes a good pub gets sold for a reason. So you need to look into that and understand why it's sold. It could be there could have been a murder there, a stabbing there. There's loads of different things. And I've seen someone recently where there's a pub that something was committed there, crime was committed there. They actually tried to take it to plan and actually lost. And it got overturned, but it was very difficult to prove. And they turned it into a children's nursery because they proved it was for the local community. And it's called the Red Bus, and it's actually become a really viable business. And good, so, you know, it just depends. So you'd be very careful. So that gentleman there.
That's my question.
Did he? Good, good.
Okay, we're going to do one more pub planning game deal and actually do the numbers. So this one, is anyone subscribed to YPN magazine? Great. So half of you would have hopefully had November's issue, the dark blue developers issue. Mike and I did a slot in there, and we covered these two deals. So this is the punch bar. I'm just going to cover really high level figures. So I'm not going to go through everything. Yeah, of course.
So this pub here is in the Midlands. I grew up in the Midlands. And this was run by a local gangster. And nobody could get to this pub. It was repossessed, and even the bailiffs couldn't get it. Right? I got a phone call from the guy, one of the guys I know who works in the bank. And he said, would you be prepared to take on this pub? Just buy it and take it on as is. I said yes. We bought it. We went and negotiated with them, and it wasn't easy. We got hold of it. We found them somewhere else to live. We moved them on, and that's what we got. We got planning on it, right? And it was very straightforward. That's an easy deal to do. The problem with it was to remove the tenants that were in there, and even the bailiffs. But I'm not saying we've done anything special. We just gave them what they wanted within reason and accounted for it. So you need to always make sure when you do your due diligence in your homework, you look into these things and think, what do I need? Write a list of what I need, what do I need to do? And we needed to relocate them. We paid for somewhere else for them to live for 12 months, paid the rent up front, relocated them, and then we went on. And in the meantime, just to make sure they did move out, we got all the services disconnected, so they couldn't stay there anyway. That's how we've done that too.
So this is a mixed use scheme, and there's residential on the top for 14 flats, and down on the bottom is a mixed use. So sorry, the retail, which was co-op at 65k with a kind of pre-agreed lease. It wasn't a contract, at least it was a statement of intent that before we bought it, they were willing to rent at those kind of rates. Finally, we put a tanning salon on the right-hand side. So let's do the numbers. So purchase price was 375. I'm going straight to the equity input. So what did the investor put in? 207. For 6 months on finance, we did actually extend for another 2 before we sold. So this is the appraisal we put in. And the return was 70%. Now, the deal structure we'll cover in a minute, but we're essentially giving the return based on the equity and a 50% profit share. So that 70% is actually return on the investor's money. So we earn twice that in real terms.
So we sold this pub 3 times, okay? And when I say we sold it 3 times, we sold it for 830,000. But the agent we were dealing with sold it to the wrong person. The person was never going to buy it. And you've got to be very careful when you sell these things to people, because there's a lot of builders out there that say they've got the money and actually haven't. They come up with proof of funds, and then as they go through the process, and one of the processes was there was bats in the building. So you couldn't go back in and do a second bat survey in the building. So they used it as an excuse. They get the contract, they settle the contract and play it. So I've got and obviously I've got a lot of deals going on at one time, so what we did was we just withdrew it. We then went to a second part of the agent, said, we know these people, Co-op know these people, we'll do a deal with these. Again, they didn't understand the residential element because they were commercial developers, they were buying the Co-op. So in the end, withdrew the contract, got to know a local guy that I knew from around the area. He bought it, we've done a delayed completion, and he's actually going to change the plan. He's going to put affordable housing in it because he understands affordable, and that's what he does. He likes to give something back to the community. We've done a deal with him, he's paid us half, investor's been paid, we'll get our return in the end of this month, and that's how that deal's worked. Very straightforward, but again, there was its problems with it, so don't think it was straightforward. But the biggest problem with that building was the bats, and it was a local person that was around the area. So with planning, sometimes you actually have to do your homework and sit down and think about things, because planners these days will be, and I hope there's no planners in the room, planners these days will be very cautious about what they do, what they give, because they can be slated by the local community. So when you go for planning, the best thing to do is go in and have a very broad conversation with them about what you'd like to achieve and get the feedback back from them. Our strategy is we don't go for outline planning, we just put a straightforward application in and we get it refused. And the reason we get it refused is because we know then what they will take and what they won't take. Right? So there's no excuse, you can't get out of it, that's what they've said, that's what they're going to take. And we do it all the time. Right? A lot of people say, oh, you pay so much money, you go and have a lovely conversation with them, they make you a nice cup of tea and a sandwich, you walk back out, you put your application in, you get refused, and you think, what was the point of that? So that's why we do what we do. You then get a very good understanding, and there'll always be somebody in the planning office that will have a vision for, and you let them have their vision, let them say what they want to say. I want to see this tower on the end of it, I want to see it. Then you give them a bit of it, so they actually buy into what you're trying to achieve. Really, at the end of the day, what you want to do is buy the building, get a plan application and sell it, or build it, whichever you decide to do. So you just work with them and go along the journey, but there's people that you need to involve, like your highways, so you need to be talking to highways consultants to make sure for parking, because what comes with your planning is parking, and believe it or not, the planners like to see 2 parking spaces. Even though you're buying a £130,000 flat and you're struggling for the deposit, you've got 2 cars. Now I struggle with that, and there's a bus stop outside, right? But they don't, they want 2 parking spaces, which is ridiculous. So affordable housing is another strategy, so anything above 14, it's affordable housing, so yes.
Sorry, can I ask, I apologize if I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but you sort of pointed out with this one, you sold it for planning game rather than actually develop it out.
Yeah.
I can cope with how you can look at it and work out the GDV of the property and what it's going to be at the end. How do you go about actually calculating how much profit you're going to make on a planning game as opposed to?
How do you work that out?
Yeah, so if you know you're buying the site for X, how do you, I can cope with what it's going to be worth once you developed it, but how do you calculate that?
Well, what you do is you put into appraisal You need to work out what the end value is and what your build costs are, and you subtract everything back. Then you're left with a land value. And normally you go to an agent, and an agent will tell you. The old rule used to be a third, a third, and a third. That's all changed now, depending on where it is. So it's a very difficult one to calculate because it depends where it is in the country. Because if it's in Birmingham, it's a third, a third, and a third. If it's in Bristol, it's not. So it's very, very different. So you normally work back. So once you put your appraisal together, you put your land value in, all your costs, you work out what your end value is going to be, you subtract, you normally end up with a figure. And you know, you give the developer 25% margin, 20% margin, depending on which working on. And that's how you work your land value out.
Is that okay? So I'm going to move on to the key learnings, so do feel free to ask questions. This triggers more.
Sorry, there is one other thing I need to add to that. There's one thing in that you won't probably work out is there's a value now to the freehold that never used to be there years ago. So when you take a site and you work out your GDP, you work out each flat. But if you actually were to sell the freehold off separately, that has a value. So you can charge £150, £200 per year per flat. And believe me, it doesn't take a lot away from the actual value. So you can still sell a flat at 140, 145. It doesn't actually make any difference. People are quite happy to pay that. But what it actually does is it adds £35,000, £40,000 onto your appraisal. So that's something a lot of people miss out. And you can sell that. A lot of pension companies buy them because they find them very useful, freeholds, and they're guaranteed money because people will always pay £150, £200 per year every year. And you know, they're big portfolios. So that's another way as well. People like the co-op won't because they want, you know, when they take a lease, they want to take the building freehold and free. And again, if you put someone like co-op in, that's a better yield, that gives you a better value because of the covenant. What I mean by that is the strength of the business. So you look at the balance and the strength of that business will command value. So if you're, you know, you can work on something like that, could be 6.5% yield, right? Whereas if it was a local Chinese restaurant, it could be 10% yield, right? And that influx on the value.
Okay. So coming off key questions or key learnings, make sure it's not the only pub in the village. Make sure the local plan is showing a strong demand for housing. Look at the trading of the pub. Remember, there's a good question, what if the pub's trading or stop trading? Well, what if it's trading very well? That might be a really good reason not to close it down. So, you know, it's got a yin and a yang, this question. If it's a negative, you know, it's gone bust, and there are other pubs in the village, then, or the town, then the locals are more likely to tolerate that. If it's a strong trading pub, it may not be. So always take a steer from the planning consultants first before you even commit. So the bat survey and the mining survey are things you pay for, maybe £300. It's £300 well spent if they come back and say, oh no, we've got mines underneath. Don't pick fights with planners. So if the steer is negative and really troublesome, then just move on. It's not worth it. Move on to your next deal. Court the buyers before you buy. It's a kind of snowball effect that you're moving towards purchase, but you've got to do quite a few things before you can strike. And one of those is to court the buyers and find out the exit. As Mike has already said, for good reason, clear the site inside and out. You don't want the conservation orders coming on you if you can clear that immediately. Establish the boundaries and the right of way. So Mike might have to help me here, but it's things like access to the site, parking.
If the pub's been sold 5 or 6 times by different breweries, guaranteed the lawyers will have missed something. There'll be a boundary change, there'll be an old right of way. You know, that pub could have been in the community. Normally the pub's been knocked down, there was a pub there before, you know, somebody's got a right of way over it. So you've got to make sure you go through that. I'll give you an instance of this. We bought a site, there was a company called Luminar Leisure many years ago. And Luminar Leisure used to run a lot of nightclubs. So we went to an auction, we bought 3 nightclubs at the auction. And one of the nightclubs that we bought was in Plymouth. We bought the site, we got planning on it, we bought the site, we did all the plans, we went to see the planners and we flipped it. And we flipped it to a PLC, okay? The PLC had top lawyers, we had top lawyers that we used at the particular time. 2 years later we found out there was a mine in underneath that site that ran all the way, but it was so far down that nobody ever discovered it. That site is still there to this day, still there, undeveloped. None of the lawyers could get sued because it went back through everybody, and it went back through and through. We also bought another site off Luminar Leisure, which was the one with the ceiling in, which we had all the problems with, and there was a restriction on it. When Luminar Leisure went bust, we went back and we actually bought the restriction off the receivers, and we sold the site on, even with the listed ceiling, because it had a use. So just be very careful with pubs, because there's a lot of things. Make sure you've got a good lawyer. Because a lot of people walk in, and I've seen my own father do it, and say, oh, he's a lawyer, he's good enough. He's not. You need a good property lawyer. That's your key to understanding, and sit down with him. And it's not about you reading the top, it's about him coming to you with a list of problems. If he comes to you with a list of problems, he says, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, there's a right of way, you can then get correct indemnity insurance, you can then look and go through that title with him. Sit down, spend that 20 minutes with him, going through everything. At least you know you're covered. Because the last thing you want, and believe me, it happens all the time, you sell that site on to somebody else and there's a problem. And then everybody ends up trying to sue each other because something was missed. We've had one recently on the site where we bought and the boundary was moved, and at the back there was wasteland, and the boundary was moved and the road was in position. We've had to take an insurance policy against it. We've won at the end of the day, but again, if you've got a good lawyer, they'll pick up on it, they'll go into it. People just think, oh, I'll pay the lawyer 500 quid and he'll do a quick job. No, pay your lawyer good money, make sure he does it. Make sure he's got a good policy, and then you're protected if anything goes wrong.
Thanks, Mark. Highways and access, we've covered. And if you can establish terms in principle with retailers, if you've got a mixed scheme or something like that, do it early and do it quickly. And sometimes you need a PR company. If it's a big scheme and lots of people are being affected by your planning, then you can use a PR company. Mike, I don't know if you want to say about Elizabeth Shaw. Should we mention that later or do it now? Complete the PR?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
So, the reason we use PR companies is normally if you try and engage with the local community, they'll just say, oh, developer trying to make money here, trying to build something in our backyard, and you don't understand, and you know, the capitalism comes into it, and the banners come out, and it's everyone's like this. So we use local PR companies, and what I mean by that is a local lady that's got a small PR company, and she'll go and talk to everyone, and she'll understand what everyone wants out of the site, and what they want to see, and what they'd like to see put back in the community. What it does is it gives it that softer approach, and everyone feels a lot more happy, and everyone talks to you. So when I've been there, we've walked out of planning, and we've been there with banners shouting at us and abuse, you know, because and I understand they're protecting what they feel is rightfully theirs around their area. But there is no such thing as a view. Views don't exist. You can't say, well, I look out of my window and I see, you know, the garden next door. There's no such thing. There's such thing as right to light. You have a right to light, but you have no such thing as right to view in planning terms. So, and this is what people don't understand. So we've developed sites where there's been a terrace of houses, there's been an old allotment in the back, it's been there for years, everyone's looked out on it, and we go in and we want to develop it, we want to put 5 houses on it. All hell breaks loose, right? All hell breaks loose, right? So the first thing I do is I send the lads in. It might be right, might be wrong in people's eyes, but I send my lads in, and they normally go in on Christmas Eve, right? And they clear the site. So then everyone's left for work, and the site's now cleared. So I now have a clear site. I have the canvas. Planners come to me and say, why did you do that? Why did you go in? But now I have a clean site. Now I can start, right? I've already sent a PR consultant in. She's gone and spoke to them, right? And it's just that softer approach. So you try and soften things, you know. I'll tell you about, you know, Robin will ask me this later, and I'll tell you about this now. A deal that I've done many, many years ago. I'll never forget it. It's a very special deal, and I'll tell you why. And it was a hospital in Birmingham, and there was a couple of houses on it, and the guy that was there at the time, he was head of the estate. And we come along, we were buying these 4 houses, we were going to knock them down, and one of the things we wanted to do was build accommodation on the site for nurses for the hospital. The whole area went mad. like you wouldn't believe. There was articles in the paper about me. I was reading profiles about me that I never knew existed, right? And everybody was onto me. So I employed a PR consultant. She went around taking everyone's names. You know, had coffee mornings in the local hall. Everything didn't work. They hated me with a passion, right? Because as far as they were concerned, we were going to come in and do all these things. The guy that worked in the hospital at the time, who was head of the estates, said to me, he said, you know, if you cut those couple of trees down, he said, you know you'd get 6 more apartments, don't you? I said, yeah, but I can't because they're conservation. But I can, he said, because there's no such thing as crown land, as a tree preservation order on crown land. And I said, why would you want to do that for us, Mark? He said, well, look, Mark, it's a bit like this. He said, I've got 2 children that are very heavily disabled. And he said, we're trying to raise enough money to buy a bus. So he said, I'm not blackmailing you, but he said, if you could help a charity that we act for, I'm about to leave because I'm going to work for the prison service for their estates. And I'll make sure the trees are down. So I'm at home, picture this, on a Monday morning, and there's a knock on the door, and there's 2 policemen at the door. And they want to know where I've been the day before. I've been at home, I live in Bristol. They said, no, you've been to Birmingham, and you've cut all these trees down. I said, no, I haven't. I said, while we're on the subject, I haven't exchanged on the site. We have a contract, we're ready to exchange, we're going to actually exchange today. Why? Is there a problem? We've cut all the trees. I said, no, I haven't. There's nothing anyone could do. Cut the trees down, paid the money to the charity. It all worked out. We got more. And it was only, and it wasn't me. I didn't sit down and scratch my head and think, oh, it was somebody, because I got on well with them and communicated with them, they actually liked me. They turned around to me and suggested it, and it worked. So that's what I'm saying. And the reason it was special was because he wasn't motivated by greed. He was doing something for his own family, you know, and we actually ended up getting more on the site, and we actually ended up building it. And again, I flipped the site. I didn't even build the site. When I say we actually ended up building it, we got the site ready to build, and we got a really good offer, and we sold it to a gentleman. He bought it, he built it, and done very well out of it. And we went on and sold 2 more sites to him. So that's what can happen, and that's why you do need to be very careful when you get involved with these deals, because you do need to be talking to people, and you do need to keep lines of communication open. But people will dislike you. Doesn't matter who you are. You could be the nicest person in the world. You could be the vicar of the local church. But if you're going to build on that garden, someone will dislike you for what you're doing, and you have to understand that. So what you have to try and do is, end up using a local PR consultant, or a local person that runs a local club and just talk to everyone, or give a donation to the local youth club. Just do something that helps the community, and then that way it takes away the badness away. And a lot of people don't, and they don't care. And you see David Wilson going, and they're going to put 5,000 houses up, and they upset everyone, and they're up in court, and it all ends miserably. Then the site gets built, but no one's happy. So you always try and see whether you can get people on site.
That's great, thank you, Mike. So yeah, this was the final point, is, when you're taking your pub away, you might not realise it's the pub's local football team. It's where the nursery meets. It's also where they do car boot sales, and you don't realise how charged that situation is. It's a very sensible idea, using community groups and PR companies. So now I want to move on to refurbs. Does anyone know the suspension bridge in Bristol? Okay, has anyone driven up to it? And on the left-hand side there's a row of very tall crown houses like this. Well, Mike took this is in our pamphlet you've got here. So the figure's a bit hard to read here, but if you want to dig it out, I don't have the page number. Basically, Mike took this as an ex-DVLA office, got planning for 5 luxurious boutique apartments, and created a 42% return on equity here. So this is, again, it's about spotting a trend. Mike was aware that wealthy families were moving out of London, and quite a few people want to retire in a nice, spacious apartment. Not so much bungalows, more apartments. Why? Because it's a little walk to the nicest coffee shop, the nicest restaurant, where the butcher is, all the local shops. You're in the heart of the community, and you can build a whole bunch of friendships around you, because you're living centrally, and Clifton Village is absolutely stunning. It's a great place to live. So that's why Mike specialised, and he was an early adopter into this theme. Mike's track record is the top end. If you talk to someone who's on Mastermind, Mike Mather's Mastermind 8, he came to see us and he said, we always were baffled by your valuations, Mike, but you proved us wrong every time. He's a evaluator in Bristol.
Sorry, what was the last that?
Yeah, of course.
Bridge audit deal, was that purchase subject to planning or was it unconditional?
Excuse me, Mike. Yeah, bridge corner. Was it subject?
That was
to-
part, excuse me, I'm just doing two things at once. It was part of a bigger project, so it was a scheme there was a larger scheme around the corner, there was 3 houses involved as well, and it was all split and sold. And one of the guys I knew that was involved with it turned around to me and said, look Mike, there's this part here, and they felt that was the ugly duckling, because when you see it, it was an ugly duckling, and they were going to do the flats around the corner, so we bought part of the building, which consisted of these apartments. And what we actually did was, that was the penthouse, and in there is, believe it's 2 floors. So when we bought it, there was only 1 flat underneath, a small little basement flat really, and we found these coal bunkers. I thought, if we open that right up, and the building's built into an enclave like that, so we got all light at the rear, and we dug out a car park at the back and put all windows in it, we ended up, that apartment was just short of 3,100 square foot when we finished, and we started off at 1,200 square foot with little pokey windows. So that's what we've done. It's top end, and one of my largest investors to date that I work with and I've got a great relationship with, didn't know I'd done this building. We've worked with them for years, and they came along one day and he said, you know Mike, he said, I'm coming to retirement and I'd really like an apartment. He said, you know in Clifton by the bridge? And I said, yeah, we've just done it. And they said, really? He said, yeah, it was one of those. That's my house.
So were they were already apartments, were they? I think the question was...
No, so that was the old DVLA offices. So it's where...
Did you buy it in an option?
No, we bought it. I bought it again through an agent I know, that I have a relationship with. I have a lot of relationships with, I'm one of these people, I say what I think. So a lot of people don't like me, and a lot of people really like me. And the people that really like me do business with me. So I know they always talk straight to me. People that don't like me, I don't do business with them, so it works. So they're the types of relationships I have with people, and I work very closely with people. So, you know, I don't get anything cheaper than anybody else. I just see an angle that somebody else hasn't seen, or I can move quicker than anybody else because I have the money, that's all. I'm not any better than anybody else in this room. It's just, I'm told about something, and I work it out in my head, I go away, Robin speaks to some of the investors, or previously, you know, it would have been my own money, and, you know, I've done it for years, and I just decided in the last recession that I wasn't going to do it anymore. You know, I looked at my family in the face when all hell broke loose with the banks, and it really did break loose, because you woke up in the morning and you owned a site that was worth 20 million, and now it's worth $1 million. And the reason it was worth $1 million was because no one wanted to buy it off you. And the bank wanted their money back. And they didn't care they got the money back, they were going to get the money back. So you had to, and I had to look at my family in the eyes and say, I'm not doing this anymore, I can't do it anymore, the stress will kill me. And that was my worst breaking point, I can honestly say. And it's amazing because through all that period, I went to see the banks myself, because I'm one of these people, I react very quickly. Went to the banks myself, sat down with them, took a very good lawyer that I worked with, and sat down with them and said, look, we want to negotiate. And the bank said, no. We said, well, we do, and we want to see all the paperwork, all the loan agreements that we've signed. Believe me, there was a lot of them. We had stuff all over the country, and we sat down, piece by piece by piece. We went through every single one. We negotiated, and we bought our way out of every deal. And then I had clients coming up to me, who weren't clients at the time, saying, can you act for us? I said, what do you mean? We've got a bit of a problem. Okay. And that's how it started. And then it just got more, and people said, well, you've had your fingers burnt a few times. Can you do that for us? I said, well, what do we get out of it? You know, we charge you a fee. No, we'll give you a percentage of the profit. So I didn't lie in bed one day and just think this is what they'll do. And that's how it ended up. And 5, 6 years on from that, it's just escalated, and people come to me now. People sit down with me, talk to me, and I look at people square in the eye and I think, can I work with you? Do I like you? Do you like me? Is it going to work? And if the answer's no, I won't work with you. And Robin seeing me do that, And at the same time, they have to like me. And if we do, we make money together. We go on a journey and we make money. And that's what we do. But again, we are no different to anybody else. We have contacts, we work with people, people like us, people give us things. We see opportunities.
So, thank you, Mike. So, the question on here was, did we get it unconditionally?
No.
So we didn't.
But we've seen the basement potential in it, and we've seen the market changing, and we knew it was opposite the bridge, and we knew we could turn it into top end.
So it was 4, became 5 when we dug that. So this is a new trend coming up near Bristol. Southwest of Bristol, about 2 miles from Clifton, the nice area we've just seen, is a tiny little triangle called Fayland. Why do we like Fayland? Well, it's hemmed in by fields that we can't build out. But there's some nice, good footprint bungalow plots here. We like it, and we've taken this one off a family where there's a vacant plot behind, so an opportunity for new build. It's the only one in the village. And this one here, which is it's both in probate sale. We're going to build up and create something much more special looking than this. This is the only image I could find in Fayland of a bigger one. I've got some I've got some images of the existing property at 950 in the village, but it's not great focus, so I couldn't paste it in. Just get the idea that we're building up, creating a new story. We're going to dress it with nice gate posts, make it really, really top end family home, 5-bed family home. You get a really strong return. So this will be 255k investment, 37% return, and this is a 6 to 8 month project.
So why, you'll ask, are we doing this? This is what we've seen in the market. This is different to what other people are doing. So Bristol, if any of you know Bristol well, Bristol, the dynamics in Bristol has changed. It's such a small city and property's gone mad. It's a bit like London, it's gone absolutely mad from years ago. And you've got little pockets that are left where everything around it has gone up. And you've got a lot of older people, retired people, living in these bungalows. And you've got a lot of private schools around there, and there's a lot of wealth. So we've gone in, and other people have gone in, and started turning these bungalows into sizable houses. And we're doubling. In some cases, we've trebled the values. So we've seen something in the market that not a lot of people have seen. That's all we're doing. There's nothing special about it. And local families are going, well, we can buy that house for 950,000, whereas if we buy a mile up the road, we're going to pay 1.5 million. And as that area changes, you won't get these opportunities. And they're in every area because it's trendy, it's fashionable, and there's areas that change. And wherever you come from, wherever you live in the country, whether it's Edinburgh, Hull, Leeds, Birmingham, there's areas that are changing. And you'll see that. You can see by the local high street, the shops, the schools, and that's how you see these opportunities. And you've just got to be a leader. You've just got to go in and identify and say and believe. You know, and one thing I've always learned about property is you've got to believe that you can create something and sell it. And once you sell it and once you see it happening, other people will follow. And that's what happens.
So we're not the very first one in the village, there's already one, which is great, and we had an interior designer who'd done dressed two for sale in this area. She told us what the price was, it was off market. So we kind of had confidence through our network, and also a local agent said, yeah, you can get 950 for that. So this went to an investor just recently, just closed this one out. There's Fayland, so there's Clifton, it's southwest, there's your M5 we talked about. Mike's house is here, Portishead is there. Your 5-bed houses in Clifton don't have this kind of footprint. So you get a nice garden, you're close to a lovely golf course just here, and you know, just 2 minutes driving you into the Clifton. Numbers on this one, 247 is the investment, 7 months, return 36.9%. So key learnings, look for additional space for apartments, that was the Clifton one. Spot the trend and be the early adopter. People are looking to retire in large apartments. Now something else we did on here is we did an exchange with delayed completion subject to planning. So we took the sting away from it, from the investor's point of view. We waited for planning to come in and then we could go ahead.
So on that, talk that one through. So if you've got if you've got, say you want to buy something, can you just flick to that next? No, the one after, sorry. No, that's what, yeah. If you want to buy something, and let's say you want to buy this bungalow here, and you say, oh, I want to buy this, and you go in, you start negotiating, and it's older people, and you say to them, we'll bid you $425 for your bungalow, right? They go, no, I don't want it, I want $450, that's the only one. If you leave it for a while, and you see there's no one else come along, and you go back to them and say, I tell you what, I'll give you $450 for your bungalow, but I want to get planning on it. You can live in it, you can do everything, and I'll buy it, and I'll exchange with you, and I'll give you 10% deposit once I get planning, right? But I will exchange with you before, and then once I get, I'll complete within 28 days. The likelihood is, if they can't sell it, they'll do that deal with you, right? Once you've done that, you've now got your planning gain. So when you go back to the bank with that bungalow's not worth $450 anymore. It could be worth $650 depending on the area and where it is. And now you want to build this, and guess what? You've got some equity in that site to be able to build this, to be able to create that opulent house. That's the story to that. Yeah.
Can I ask, if you are looking to do that, what's the sort of most secure and least financially, least expensive way of doing that? What's the...
So this one, we would do it on a bridge for 6 months whilst we get planning. This particular deal, I'll walk you through this one.
Sorry, if you're talking about doing an exchange and delay completion.
Yeah, if you subject to plan.
What's, I mean, how much money you put into that, if at all? Are you putting a deposit in or anything? Or?
Well, you're going to have to exchange with 10% deposit. So that's all, depending on whether you can get away. This is unconditional, this deal.
Yeah, so this is... So if we were doing it on this one, subject to plan.
If you were doing it on this one, then
44k first.
Yeah.
We won't pay stamp duty until we complete, and then it's most of these fees here. So another 35, 40k. Looking about 80k basically, deposit and all the fees. They're staggered fees, so as our architects will probably charge you 20% up front, 70% when the plans have gone in, and then a final 10%.
And don't make the mistake that most people make, because most people do. They think, I can do this myself. I'll get a local planning office, use a planning consultant. Because believe me, I've seen people all the time they do it. They go to appeal, they lose, they're dead in the water. There's no way back. And all you've done, you might as well go outside, get your money, tear it up and put it in the drain. So use a planning consultant that knows the area. Make sure you do your homework, find out who's good in the area, and use a good architect. And don't design something that looks, odd and stupid. Design something that's already in the area, that's already got planning. Because you see people that go along and they design something. In this house, there is other houses like that within the area. So and because it's contemporary, planners like contemporary architecture. So you're more likely to get something like that. Whereas if you design something with pillars and it's like something out of a footballer's house, you won't get it.
Just out of interest, Mike took the planner and the architect to this site before we bought it, which is the kind of privilege you get when you've looked after your power team for some time. But they both stood on this site, which has risen up on the hillside with a fantastic view. So, yeah,
So I bought this unconditionally. So this site was bought unconditionally, and my investors, when they questioned me on this, when they questioned me on this, I said I looked at the local area. And it's a green belt area, which means fields everywhere. And I see the rules in the green belt have been broken 3 or 4 times. The planning consultants questioned me, and I had the evidence there. I said, well, how come it's happened here, here, and here, within the area? And when we went to see the planning officer to have that brief conversation, he said, as long as it fits in within the environment, we will consider it. In other words, we will get a tick in the box. But we've got to make sure we do. Sorry, that lane?
Yes.
Yeah, so I just want to get this straight, so that you exchange on 10%.
Yes.
Subject, and you'll complete subject to planning.
Yes, once you have the planning, but you have to detail the planning that you're going to get. So you can't just go, well, I'm going to get planning for a 10-storey block. You have to agree with a party, the people that own the house, I'm going to get planning for this house, so many square foot, and how it looks.
And if you don't get the planning, you lose the 10%?
No, that's up to you, but 9 times out of 10 you negotiate to get your deposit back. The money that you lose is your architect's fees, your planning fee, right, and there's ways with planning fees as well. There's ways of saving money with planning fees. Planners absolutely hate this is when they ask you for a detailed consent and they will say to you, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, we'd like to pay £7,500 for a detailed consent, right? You say, no, I want outline, because I might want to change things. Okay, that's £1,500. But they don't ever tell you that. So what you always try and do is outline and miss something out. Saying, well, to reserve matters because we'll negotiate the garden later. We're not sure how the garden's going to look, so we can't give that. What it means is you do have to go back once you have your planning and you're ready to build, because you've only got an outline consent. But what you've done is saved yourself £5,000. So if you don't, and that could be 6,000, 10,000, depending. But what it means is when you get your planning consent, you've got it in the bag, you then go back and discuss the detailed matters.
And just to pick up as well, another exit here is to refurb and sell for 750. So we buy for 440, we'd refurb about, was it 90, 80? 90k to refurb as a bungalow and then sell for 750. So you mitigate your losses, you probably still make some money.
So the views from this house, so I need to explain this house to you, right?
Let's get back to the map.
When we bought this house and we took the investors along, all they could hear was the M5 motorway, right? And they went, I'm not buying this house, it's in 2 acres and all I can hear is the motorway, right? And then we turned them completely round and said, look out that way and look at your view. And all you can see is the water, it's beautiful, right? So we said, if you were to buy that house without that noise, you'll pay 2.5 million. There's your example down the road. When we built this house, all we want is 1.2, 1.3. Do you think somebody will buy this house? Yes. That was the answer. That's how the deal got done. And that will sell. Because a lot of people will take a view on things. You know, where I live, there's houses down the end of my road where you can hear the motorway and the £3 million, right? And the reason is because people take a view. If you couldn't, there'd be £7 million, right? But it's a motorway. At the end of the day, it's not going to move. It's always going to be there, but it's a private road. So, you know, you've got to consider all these things. Don't rule things out. And someone said to me, you know the best thing for a motorway, don't you? I said, no, bamboo. I said, why? Because it whistles. Plant loads of bamboo, right? You'll still hear it. You'll never get rid of it. But at the end of the day, it's not the worst. Now, I'm not on about if it's a service station on the motorway and you can hear it. That's a different story. I'm on about slight noise. So don't be put off by things, because other people will be put off. They'll look at that bungalow and go, don't like that. You can hear the motorway. It's on a busy road. Yeah, but can you create something out of it that's very different? That's the answer.
Okay. Thank you. So again, quick numbers, 215 was this investment. Over 6 months, we go on a bridge loan because we're going for planning and we can't get a development loan at this stage. We want an end value of 1.5, where post-planning value is 700, and we use this planning uplift to fund the next part of the deal. So the deposit for the bungalow plus the planning uplift equals enough to go into the development as a development deposit. We use a new product to pay down the old loan, and we start this 10-month build phase on a development loan. Total project duration 16 months, so that's 10 plus 6. And we worked this one out as 86% return over 16 months. And we'll dress this property, we'll have a viewings weekend. Mike's other half, Michelle, his wife, is an interior designer, so we'll dress it nicely. We'll have a bombardment of viewings weekends, and we should sell. So key learnings. We've actually set up a construction company, as you know, to keep the costs under control. The last thing you want is a contractor just going rogue on you. So we have our own construction company. They've actually gone bust on us before. That's not very helpful. You have our own site manager to keep control over those contractors. We cap the profits at 10%, so this is nice and reassuring for the investor. Subject to planning offers, go with exchange and delay completion if you can. It's another leverage to get a deal done. So finally, we're going to move on to building student accommodation. We tend to buy unconditionally, but it's either a site which is failed planning. This one's on failed planning, or it could be an office, an old office use. So we build it out, we rent and manage, and then we handle the exit to a fund or an institution. So I'm going to move straight to key learnings because it's a whole subject in itself. This student accommodation is a big old subject. Here's a few things that if those of you who've ever thought of doing these kind of deals, these are just the sort of tiptoe across the top key learnings from Mike. The market's got about 3 to 5 years to run in a bull run, if you like, for the student market. That's Mike's take on it. Get really close to a university. So just think about it. You might have a 600 bed 1.5 miles away from the student union block, but if you're in closer, suddenly you've done better than that huge building over there. So you can beat the competition by getting really close. The first exit, you must think, can I exit in 3 to 5 years' time on a residential scheme? Because what's going to happen when the market turns is you might be holding some stock which you could use in a residential purpose. Meet the town planners beforehand. Have a really open conversation with them first. Glean as much as you can before you buy. Use the local architects, the ones that know the local issues. Break down the cost into price per bed costs. Yes, your packaging of the build is in packages, but when you're working out your end value, it's always price per bed.
Can you explain that?
Yeah, do that if you don't mind.
So the reason with hotels, the reason you break it down is you've got to look when you sit down and you start off with your appraisal and you're going, right, I'm going to buy this and I'm going to put 30 beds in it, okay? So because I'm going to put 30 beds in it, you need to work out how much it's going to cost to build per bed, right? And how much per bed is going to cost you. The reason is because you've got management fees. A lot of people forget about the running costs, right? So running costs on a typical bed in a 50-unit scheme is about 2,500 to 2,500 to 2,250. That's all of it costs. That can come down if it's not a foreign student. Foreign students have a different attitude. They stay in their rooms 85% more of the time. They come from a different climate, so you can walk into the building, and believe me, I've done it many times, and you go, Jesus, what is running off you? And someone comes out and says, the heating working. You look at them and go, what? It's because they're from a different climate, they're not used to it, so your bills are going to be a lot more in that building, but they will let that building off you 51, 52 weeks a year, so your rents are more. So that's why beds, it's all about per bed, what it costs you per bed, what it costs you to buy per bed. So if you buy a building, you go, right, I can get 13 there, it's cost me 7,000 a bed to buy, right? How much is it going to cost me to refurb? It's going to cost me 20,000 to refurb per bed. What am I going to get per bed rent? I'm going to get 7,000 a year per bed. That's how you work it out. So it takes away, and then when you sell it, you know. So if you're building something that's institutional, you'll sell it on a yield of 6.5% to the market, and that will drive your value. If you're selling it and you're renting it just to anybody and selling it, you'll sell it 10%. So that's what it's all about, and it is a very complicated subject, but if you get it right, it's very profitable. But you need to know what you're doing. And I see it all the time, and I won't mention anything else. I heard someone talking about Leicester here tonight to some, and I know Leicester. I've looked at Leicester and I've studied it. There's an oversupply. And why there's an oversupply in Leicester is because people have built all the way around the outskirts of the city centre. If you can find a site that is within a stone throw of the university, little Billy or little William will go in that building there, because he won't want to go in that building over there. So that building within 5 years will be empty. So that's the only way you ever go into a city is location, location, location. It's driven by that. Because foreign students come in and go, that's where I want to be. If you went to a local student, they'll stay there half the time. They're not as bothered about location, they might stay in a house. But, you know, as we've gone through the recession, the government have invested, our universities have increased, and student accommodation has picked up. And it's going to grow and grow. And I reckon it's got 3 to 5 years. And the interesting thing behind this is the next growth area after students' accommodation is old people. is care, because it's all driven by the 60s and 50s boom, and that's the next drive, because people are living longer, so that's the next. So it's all, everything in property is driven by trends, by fashion. That's what it is.
Thanks, mate. I'm conscious of time. I'm going to try and wrap up real quick. Our deal structure is quite simple. We put the investor in charge of an SPV as a 100% shareholder. The SPV buys the asset. We put a management agreement in place that says the Coin Group deliver the project under these terms, start to finish, and there's a 50% profit share. So the Coin Group invoice the investor for 50% of the profits. The investor's got 100% security, or it's usually behind the banks, first and second charge, and that's how it works. If there's more than one investor into a deal, we recommend a chartered accountant sits on the bank account and does the payments for their behalf and advises them on tax and helps them wind up an SPV. I'm sorry I haven't got a lot of time for questions on this, so I'm going to move on. Debt funding, we use bridges for planning gain, development funding for development. It's nothing new here. We have specialist brokers, high net worth lenders, private banks, and a panel of lenders, so a panel of banks basically, Shawbrooks, Barclays, etc. Our fundraising equity profile, we're attracting in clients through our warm market base, basically. People who get to know us, people who get to know people who know us. It's usually that way. So that's the kind of breakdown. And basically our business values, we realise it's a social business, so we're out there talking to people. It's a people's business, and we've got very strong values running down the core of our business. Mutual trust and respect, being honest and straight, so when things are going wrong, we're having face-to-face meetings. We're open, we're willing to work through problems, and we hope to enjoy the relationship. So that's the kind of core values about who we are. And then it was going to be Mike on the mic, but thankfully he's taken quite a lot so far. So Mike, you've talked about surviving 2 recessions, going to the banks. Your worst experience was it this one?
Yes.
So do you want to do it? Do you mind if we do a quick Q&A?
So,
I was just thinking, after this, maybe it's best to just take a break.
Shall we take a breather? Come back.
Well, I don't know. It's just kind of
I think his experience is more valuable than anything else.
Yeah, okay.
It's all right.
Okay, so just maybe just take
a break on this one.
Yeah, toilet break and
break
just 10 minutes. Yeah, thank you.
So this was the one where I woke up one day. We bought an old chocolate factory, me and an ex-business partner, the 2 of us, bought it. It was great at the time. Planners bought into it. The Lord Mayor of Bristol, who was an architect at the time, was with us, and we went along the journey, and we had this great scheme. 252 residential units, 300,000 square foot commercial. It's going to employ about 100 people. It was great. Right? It was a great journey, and we had an end buyer. Then all of a sudden, my son was born, and 3 weeks later, the largest recession that I can ever remember in history hit us. And I woke up to see a little baby in my wife's arms and a site that wasn't worth anything. And the banks wanted to take it off me, everything off me. And again, I explained, I went through a journey and I reacted. Rather than bury my head, as my business partner did, I went to the bank, I sat down with them, they didn't want to entertain me, so I went to see them in London. I sat down with them, I took a lawyer with me, and we went through the complete journey on it. And eventually we got them to agree what we were going to do, and we bought our way out. Slowly but surely sold all the sites, broke them all off. The receivers that bought that site off the bank eventually, right, ended up with failed planning permission. Even though we got planning permission, they felt the scheme that we had wasn't viable. They went through the last 7 years, we got failed planning, they've now just got planning again, 5 years later. So, you know, there's some good sort of feeling in that. The good was, that was a pub there, we bought it, there was a tenant in, I went to see the girl that was in there, she said, Mike, I want to buy a house, it's quite straightforward, I'll move out if you give me some money. I said, well, you stay there, I'll get planning, then you move out. That was the deal. Great deal, happened within 4 months, straightforward, great deal. Those deals happen every now and again. Another deal that we've done, very straightforward, very quick. Got a phone call from someone I know very well, said to me, look Mike, I'm separated with my wife, it's disastrous, she's ran off with somebody else, kids involved, tears, He said, I just walked out the house, left it. He said, can you just buy it? Can you just take it off my hands? And I remember sat in an area, very undesirable, sat there like this, looking out the window, talking to them, looking to make sure my car was still out there on the pavement. I'd done the deal, basically went in, refurbed it, and sold it straight away. And the type of person I am was, I went back 6 months later, went to see him, and gave him something for himself. Even though I didn't have to, I just felt that it was right to do that. It was very sad, but very quite profitable. This building here on the end was owned by a fund, very large fund, knew what they were doing. Don't any of you who know Palmer Capital owned that building. It was an office building. There was nothing there, there was no bathroom shop there. It was owned by Palmer Capital. Palmer Capital, Ray Palmer, the guy that heads that up, knows everything about property. Been in it all his life. I worked every angle, was sat on that building, got planning for offices. It's opposite Hargreaves Lansdowne. They're Robin's friends, who was on the news. And they couldn't do anything with it. I looked at it and thought, that's a student block. I went and done a deal with them, bought the building for a pension fund, bought the building, got planning for students, made the pension fund an absolute fortune, and myself, and the pension fund didn't want to pay me. And that's why I ended up in the High Courts. I got my money, but it wasn't a nice experience. And that's why I believe, you know, in anything that you do, you have to be fair and do things right. And everything I do is letter of the law. I do everything as an agreement, shake hands at the same time, but you have a management agreement in place and you do it, and you make money, and you make the client money, and everyone walks away and they're happy. And I always say to my clients, whenever we've done whatever the deal is, whether it's a shed to anything else, I always say to them, when we're finished, we're going to have lunch, discuss it, settle up, move on. And that's how I'd like to leave that. It's been some good experiences and some bad experiences. But the one thing I will say to you about property is it is enjoyable, and it's like a disease. It gets inside you, and you're lying in bed at night and you go, I just remembered what I can do. Or you're driving along with your family and you're driving along in the car and you see something, you think, oh, I could do that with that building. And that's what happens. And that's, you know, you learn. I've been 23 years at property, and I've learned, and I've made a lot of money, and I've lost a lot of money. But I'm here to tell the tale, and I've come back again. And the reason, just so everybody understands, the reason we've run the business from my home and not offices is that people that are investing in what we do know where I am. I'm not hiding behind anything. They come and see where we are, so they know, and people feel very comfortable with that, and it's worked very well. And we're not going to be able to do that forever, but it works well. And there's emerging markets, there's different things happening. Ireland, Spain, as the markets recover, there is opportunities, and all these opportunities, you've just got to be prepared to go for it.
Just one last one, the funniest experience. Can you do that one? So that next.
Which one was that? Oh yeah. So we bought a pub in Willenhall. So I don't know if those of you know Willenhall. Willenhall's quite a rough area in the Midlands. We bought it from an auction. So we talked about auctions earlier. We bought it, we got planning, took the team up, went up on a Sunday morning, bought it, got planning, sold it to some guys. And the agreement was with some Irish developers, and the agreement was that we had a big undercroft parking on it. And the guy was arguing with me. I can remember sat over the table, when I say arguing, having a heated discussion over the amount of money he wanted to pay me. And he said to me, in his way, he said to me, if I didn't have to dig out the ground, I'd give you £50,000 more. I said, well, there's nothing I can do. So he agreed to buy it off me. It went to contract, right? Put the demolition company in, and squatters somehow, don't know how they got in, but they got in. And when the guy knocked the building with the digger, these two guys jumped out the window, right? So I went in, stopped it all, cleared, made sure everyone was out, health and safety foremost. Carried on digging. I was driving down the M6, I got a phone call. He said, Mike, you better come back. I said, what now? He said, you have to tell me you killed someone. No, we ain't killed anyone. There's no one in the building. He said, but the machine's disappeared. In the war, they used to block the basements up, right? Because people, after the war, because people used to hide in them. The machine went down into the basement, right? And disappeared. The guy's in the machine, in the basement. Right? So I've gone back, all I could see is the arm of the machine. So I thought, I know what I'll do. So I phoned the guy I was sending it to. I said, do you remember you said if I dig the basement out? Right? He said, yeah. I said, will you still give me that £50,000? She said, yeah. So all right, I'll dig the basement out. And then 6 months later, he's done the deal, and he must have been talking to someone around about the area, and he said, he rings me up, he said, no, you know that deal I've done with you? He said, yeah. You should tell me there was a basement. I said, well, you didn't ask.
So on that very light note, I'd like to thank you so much for your attention. We've overrun. I really appreciate that. I hope it didn't frustrate you too much. You're very welcome to work with us in the future. We'd just love to invite you to do that. If you'd like to do that, just let Richard know. That's all that we ask.
Shall we just have a quick break, for toilet break or whatever, 10-minute break, then come back for a question and answer? Is that
By
good?
all means, we're still here. No problem.
All right, cool.
Hope you can enjoy it.
Thanks.
You mentioned on one of the previous slides about courting your buyers. How do you go about that process?
Again, it depends. Again, that comes from experience. But if you're buying something in a local area, let's say you're buying a pub, you get to know all the local developers, you go and talk to them, you know. And I call them small builders, but there's always a developer that doesn't really want to take the planning risk. All he wants to do is build it out, and he'll take his margin on the bill because he's got a team of blokes that needs some put. Go and talk to him. So I've got a site at the road. Are you interested? That's what I always do. And then you'll find one that will go, yeah, I am actually interested.
What about if you like wanting to turn it into events or something like that? How do you?
That's a different end buyer.
Yeah, that's a different end user. So again, my best experience with that is there's people in the market that specialise in finding tenants, and I would use them. So, you know, there's different agents out there that specialise in commercial, and that, you know, you go along and see them and they'll say, our expertise is we've got to deal with vets for pets. You say, well, I've actually got a site, but you see, you know. But I don't know, those of you, best magazine in the market is the States Gazette. The Buyer States Gazette, and they're all in there. And you'll see them every week, or Property Week, and that's where you find all the information. But go and talk to them, and they will normally place you. You know. Anybody else?
Hi, Nikki.
Hi, do you have a minimum investment level?
We do. The minimum is £100,000,
Okay.
and we've got clients that are investing 10, 15 million pounds at the moment. So we work across the board because I've got a strategy. And it's, the planning guys that I work with, and I'll tell everybody the name because everybody should know, is Pegasus. Right? I've worked with Pegasus. They started in my kitchen. That's how well I know Pegasus. And they're all over the country. And the guy that I work with very closely always said to me when he started his business, he said, Mike, small apples grow into medium apples. The medium apples grow into big apples. So we said, we spread our business. And we do exactly the same. We've got all different kinds of customers. The one thing I didn't say when I was doing it was the reason there wasn't a lot of pubs about years ago was because Tesco's, Waitrose, everybody bought those pubs. Now that market has gone, that's why there's more pubs about. So you will see opportunities.
What's the largest development you've actually built out?
It's a good question, Dennis. We've done 15, 20 million. You know, we've done a few across the country. I mean, we just finished a site in Cardiff for student accommodation. Contractor went bust in the middle of us, and we've just finished it. And we sold a portfolio for 18 million quid. So that was the portfolio that we sold. So there's people get confused. People get sort of, what's the word? They get a bit nervous about the amounts. It's just noughts. It doesn't matter if it's 300 flats or 3 flats. Richard will tell you he does it all the time. It's no difference. It's just about the numbers. It's just making sure you get your numbers right. There's no difference. And then there's things like affordable housing, 106 payments, which is bribery for the government. Another way of saying it. So you just need to know. And again, you can get people, you can go, surveyors will advise you, you know, Unite Franks of the world, you know, you can go around and talk to their guys, their development guys, they'll help you. You know, sit down with them if they're local, go and have a chat with them. and say, look, I'm looking to buy this property, I need some help, you know.
Can I ask, from your experience, if you're looking to get somewhere subject to planning, because I just heard lots of pitfalls about different, you got the option or an option or a license or EDC. What's your preferred sort of route? What would your advice be on that?
Do you know, that's a question that is down to your personality. I'm going to say that, and you're going to look at me and think, why am I saying that? Because it's the type of person you are. I know people that are very patient people, and they put back gardens together and bits and pieces, and they end up with a huge site. It takes them 2 years to do, and then they make a load of money and go, and I think, geez, I wouldn't have the patience to do that. I'm very heavily dyslexic, so I really struggle at school, so my attention span is like that. So I look at something, I see it in pictures, can I make it happen very quickly? Yes, I can. I like that quick in and quick out, right? But I like good margins, and that's the business I do. If I do larger deals, it's normally portfolios, because I'm going to put students in it, and because we're going to sell it to an institution or a fund. That's the only reason I stay in long term. So your answer to your question is, it's down to you. If you're very good, good politician, where I'd say, very good at taking time and putting things together, then go for them small little to piece them together. But if you're not patient, like me, then go for the deals that you can get in and out very quickly. And there's a lot of them on the high street. Does that answer your question?
Sort of. I mean, my main question really is securing that deal. So if you're trying to secure the deal, so you've got a site you're looking at thinking, look, I really like the site, I want to do X, Y, and Z, other people aren't for whatever reason. But you want to test the water with the planning application first, so you want to get that planning application through. It's securing that site so it's yours and not going elsewhere. What's the...
Well, you've got to be very careful, right? Because if you've got an owner, let's say this gentleman here, right? He's got a back garden, and I think I'll put a block of flats in his back garden. As soon as he knows I'm going to put a block of flats in his garden, what's his first reaction? I'm not saying to him, I want more money. Who can blame him? So you've got to be very careful. So you think you're being clever because you've gone in, so you've actually, you've got to be very careful how you go about it. So you've actually, not tell them what, but you've got to go along and say, look, I'm interested in this, and sign an option with them, and don't tell them too much. As soon as you tell them what you're going to do, deadly. Because it might not be them, they might be the nicest person in the world, but their daughter or their aunt will say, are you mad? Why are you selling that for them? You could get a lot more for that. And that's what ends up. So you've got to be very careful the way you put that together. And cash is king in any market. If you can go in and say, I'll buy that off you now, do the deal, and then that's always the best way. But if you can't, and you want to do a planning deal, so I'm going to put one house on, and then it turns into 3 and 4. But you've now got their attention. It's now in lawyers. Once you get it into lawyers' hands, the likelihood of them walking away is very slim. There's a lot of people think, I can't be bothered. The money's in the bank, I'll do the deal. So play the contract, get the contract, and then do the deal.
Okay, a couple of more questions, I think, then we've probably got to wrap
There's
it
a
up.
lady over here, so.
I was going to ask a question. I trawled up a lady who was selling 32 pubs for a closed down brewery, and I really thought I struck oil.
Yeah, can I have a
But
number?
the prices that they had on them were just ridiculous. Is it really just the waiting game? Do you just have to keep in touch and see, let her get more and more desperate for them?
Yeah. It depends how she came across the pubs, what she thinks. It's like, I don't know, those of you that know Spain or Portugal, right? You ever try and buy a property in Portugal and say, I want to buy your property, and they go, it's £1 million. Then you go tomorrow, and it's 1.2, and you go, I said, no, you can pay £1 million. That's what people are like. So you've got to let them, everyone will sell when the time's right. I always say to people, you might want to buy that house in that road, and you go, I really want to buy that house, and that house has never came to the market in 17 years. But people's circumstances change every day, and you don't know when that day will come. So by knocking on that door, asking doesn't hurt. By sending a friendly email just saying, are you interested in selling? Because something might happen, and their focus changes, and they need that money. But they'll have forgotten about you because you mean nothing to them. But you now mean something to them because you contacted them and their situation has changed. So they want to do a deal. So that's what I'd say to you. It's just be patient. Sorry, that gentleman.
It's the chocolate factory deal that you talked about.
Do you have to keep mentioning
Yeah.
it?
Well, was the factory active when you bought it?
Yes, so we bought it off Elizabeth Shaw. So Elizabeth Shaw used to make the mints, yeah? So we bought it off Elizabeth Shaw.
Right.
And it was the factory was active. There was laws against employment. We knew the guy that was selling it, a guy called Malachi. He was relocating. It was in a great area. It was one of the areas, Greenbank and Bristol, that hadn't been developed. And we thought, yeah, this is good. And it was good. And one thing I didn't tell you, and I'll tell you really quickly, how I did the deal with the bank to get the bank to realise was, when we went for planning, and those of you that don't understand, I'll try and break it down really simple. We agreed 5% affordable housing with a 106 payment, which is a bribe to the government. Okay? That's the deal we were going to do. So we went into the bank and we said to the bank, we've now got planning. And the bank went, great. And I could see the reaction in his eye. I thought, he's going to take this off me. So I went back to the planners, had another meeting with my mate Jim from Pegasus. And we sat down and we said, if we did this deal tomorrow and we started building, would you give us less affordable? They said, yeah. So they changed the planning and put a 12-month licence on. Right? We went back to the bank went absolutely mad, but they couldn't take it back off us because they knew we had planning permission with 12 months. By the time they put the receivers into that site of us, it was over. And that's how we've done that deal. So, any other questions?
One more question then. Anybody's got one more question? Not we'll wrap it up.
Has anyone got a deal that they're doing that they're struggling with that I might be able to help?
I don't know if we've really got time for that in this room because we've only got the room till 9. No, I know that normally Paul doesn't like a deal with it, but if anybody's got something they want to speak, Hal, should we do it anyway?
Yeah.
Yeah, Hal, I don't want to get a sport. I don't like. So if anybody got a deal or just something that they want to bring to Mike or to the room, you know, you've got something, throw it out, off you go. If not.
Sorry, can you go from commercial to residential? Can you get change of use from commercial?
Yes, you can, depending on what it is, where it is. You know, it all depends on that. So, office buildings at the moment, the government realised that they couldn't build enough houses quick enough, so they had to come up with policies. So one of the policies was they changed the policy on office buildings, so you could get retrospective planning on offices to convert it to residential, right? Where it wasn't protected. But certain councils realised this and protected. So like in Oxford, for argument's sake, the university control that city, right? So planning is really, really difficult. But then in Bristol, in other parts of Bristol, people were buying office buildings and they were converting them into 30 apartments. There was no affordable, no 106 bribes, straight away it was done. So you can do it, depends where it is and what it is.
So can you go from, for example, an old factory that's closed down to...
So your biggest problem there is employment, loss of employment. Even if it's closed, they will say to you, well, somebody might come in tomorrow. So you have to demonstrate. Again, that's a very good planning consultant, right? Will tell you, so they'll look at it. And again, you look at the local plan and look at what they want to do. So we just bought a site in Worcester, and it was outside of the local plan, right? But we looked at it and we thought, there's a shortage in the local plan, they're never going to meet their target. We bought the site for a client who we do all the student stuff with, and we're going to put 20 houses on it. And we're in for planning. I was reading my emails there earlier, and the plans have come back and looking at it favourably, so we will get it. So it's all about that cat and mouse game, and it's all about looking at it, take advice from a planning consultant. I'm not a planning consultant. I didn't go to university to study that. I went to life, but they will tell you all about planning and the regulations, so always take advice.
Last year, PD was also introduced for small retail units.
Permitted development rights,
yeah. I went in for PD for it was a dry cleaning shop to convert that into residential, and we put in the prior notification, and Lewisham Council still came back and said, you know, we consider the impact on the local, you know, basically loss of employment, all that kind of stuff. But So then it's not really PD. I just was like so frustrated. I thought,
Why they brought that in was in areas where there's secondary retail and there's not enough for housing, they felt if you had a local shop there, you could convert that into an apartment. That was the reason it was brought. But if you're talking in the middle of Lewisham High Street,
it was secondary.
Secondary. Well, in theory, you should take a planning consultant's advice. One thing I've done in the past, one of the biggest things I've not mentioned about pubs is camera. So camera protects pubs. They're set up, a government body to protect pubs. So they will protect it against the local community. If I'm going to take something on, what I do is I get my planning consultant to write me a document, and then I take it to a barrister, QC, and I'll take advice on that, so I can challenge it. Right? It might cost me £2,000, but it's £2,000 well worth spending, so I can challenge it. The last thing I want to tell you about is, one of Robin's clients approached me the other day, and they said to me, my son and daughter would like to live in Clifton. How can you help them get into Clifton? Right? So they haven't got any money, they've got a bit of money, but they haven't got a lot of money. So the average price of a house in Clifton is probably 850,000. So these people are first-time buyers, right? Okay? So I'm never going to be able to get them into there, unless I'm Paul Daniels, right? So I turned around to him and said, I tell you what, the best thing they could do is buy a couple of buy-to-lets in an up-and-coming area, and the money that they get from them in rents, £700, £750 rent for each flat, and then go and rent somewhere in Clifton for £1,500, because the capital value is very different to the rent. They're now living in Clifton, but they still have 2 flats in Speedwell over here, which are rent out. That's the only way I could do it. So you can do things and you can make things happen. You've got to be creative. So I hope I've answered everybody's questions. Lovely to see you. I don't ever do this because I never want anyone to know, but Robin begged me to come. So, right. Thanks very much.